Karoline Leavitt, the press secretary, and the Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, who's become quite a interesting character on the show, they did a joint press conference, and a question got brought up that sent MAGA world into a rage spiral that I'll show you, which was very simply, there's some reporting that Amazon may start listing the amount that things are increasing in price because of directly Trump's tariffs for transparency. And the White House is not happy about that. We'll get to Amazon's reaction in a second here, which makes this whole story even more ridiculous. And then MAGA's reaction online as well. Let's just start with this. Karoline Leavitt jumps in to answer the question.
So it was reported this morning that Amazon will soon display a little number next to the price of each product that shows how much the Trump tariffs are adding to the cost of each product. So isn't that a perfect crystal clear demonstration that it's the American consumer and not China who is going to have to pay for these policies?
I will take this since I just got off the phone with the president about Amazon's announcement. This is a hostile and political act by Amazon. Why didn't Amazon do this when the Biden administration hiked inflation to the highest level in 40 years? And I would also add that it's not a surprise because, as Reuters recently wrote, Amazon has partnered with a Chinese propaganda arm. So this is another reason why Americans should buy American. It's another reason why we are onshoring critical supply chains here at home to shore up our own critical supply chain and boost our own manufacturing here.
Is Jeff Bezos still a Trump supporter?
Look, I will not speak to the president's relationships with Jeff Bezos, but I will tell you that this is certainly a hostile and political action by Amazon. And Secretary, if you have anything to
Hostile political action is her phrase there. If you appreciate the show, please do click the subscribe button. A lot to go through. That answer was almost as absurd as the fact that during the NFL draft, this graphic was up on the... I guess it's supposed to be a dog bone, but some people perceived it as something a little bit different. And it bounces. Bounce, bounce, bounce goes the dog bone. All right. Almost as absurd as that was the Leavitt answer, and even more absurd than that was the rage exhibited from the cheerleaders of the White House. One account said, "As a family that has almost an Amazon delivery a day, I am disgusted by Bezos's hostile agenda. Seems he prefers shilling for China. If he doesn't stop this crap, we will have no option or no problem canceling our Prime membership and taking our business to a company that fights for America." Someone else said, "Make no mistake about Amazon deciding to partner with a Chinese propaganda arm to display tariffs. Bezos' action is no different than when CNN was displaying a COVID death counter on screen 24/7. This is the level of disdain the elite globalists have for Americans and Trump supporters. They kept that ticker up for part of the Biden administration. So clearly it wasn't just an attack on Trump. And maybe it's, God forbid, to keep people updated on how deathly the pandemic was." Someone else said, "Amazon, I'm happy to say I've just permanently closed my account." I'm sure Bezos is devastated. "Don't need or want your cheap China products anymore. I refuse to do business with a political, hostile Jeff Bezos. I hope more Americans do the same." There is like a 90% chance this is a bot account. I love how they use the exact same language as Leavitt. Like, have your own identity. You are hostile and political, which is exactly what she said. Then one other, "America, please refrain from buying every gadget you see on TikTok and Facebook ads by shipping stores." Drop shitting, yeah. For at least 90 days, if you now continue rewarding Amazon, you'd be like a traitor to our country. Jeff Bezos is a fraud in every way. And he's just linking to Amazon to display tariff costs for consumers. If you keep, according to George here, if you keep buying from Amazon, which we're all going to keep doing, then you're a traitor. Now, I have no love for Bezos. I mean, Amazon's kind of convenient, but Bezos lately has been a complete spineless fool in aligning himself with Trump. So you might be asking, all right, MAGA's freaking out, rage spiral alert. They must have their facts straight, right? Before calling people who buy from Amazon traders. No, doesn't even seem this is going to happen. What was all that for? Jeff Stein said, Amazon statement, the team that runs our ultra low cost Amazon haul store has considered listing import charges on certain products. This was never a consideration for the main Amazon site, and nothing has been implemented on any Amazon property. So apparently the main site, as everyone was assuming this was talking about, hasn't even considered doing this. I think they should do it. And people are right. If you want to find something that's not subjected to tariffs, and also if you can pay more for American-made products, that's awesome. I love patronizing, supporting American businesses, which is why when they talk about we need to onshore certain critical industries, we need to support American business with this way and that way, we want that. We all want that. And they're doing it so terribly in the most economically harmful way imaginable. The manufacturing increases we saw during the Biden years didn't require wiping out global wealth in this significant historic way and causing economic hardship in the way that the Trump administration is doing. She also referenced, why didn't Amazon do this when Biden did inflation? Maybe it's because unlike Trump directly increasing prices with a policy that is so specifically and directly his decision, inflation during the pandemic era was a more complicated phenomenon. So that wouldn't have made sense because it wasn't because of Biden, but because of a global pandemic, supply chain issues caused by that, and recovery efforts that the entire world were participating in. Then we move forward at the same press conference with this.
Thank you so much, Caroline. Thank you, Mr. Secretary. The Chinese continue to say that the U.S. and China are not engaged in any consultation or negotiation on tariffs. You recently said you've talked to your counterpart, but more about, quote, traditional things like financial stability. So can you clarify, is the administration talking to Beijing specifically about tariffs or not?
Well, we're not going to talk about who's talking to whom, but I think that, over time,
What are these press conferences for? I said this yesterday. What are these press conferences for? When every time we get the same answer from Scott Bessent, which is, I'm not going to tell you who is talking to whom. What? Why? Okay, then go away. Why are you even doing? You're not giving us any new information. We get to, this is like day, not 100, but it is a day 100 of Trump's presidency, but not of this phenomenon. The maybe 20th time he's been asked this question. Hey, China's saying that y'all aren't negotiating. You're saying that you are. Trump is saying he's made 200 deals already, even though he's made 0. Who are you talking to? You don't have to name them, but you could say one of my counterparts or Xi Jinping or somebody else. And instead, every time it's, we won't confirm or deny if we're talking with anyone, but we're having great talks with somebody.
To Beijing specifically about tariffs or not?
Well, we're not going to talk about who's talking to whom, but I think that, over time, we will see that the Chinese tariffs are unsustainable for China. I've seen some very large numbers over the past few days that show if these numbers stay on, Chinese could lose 10 million jobs very quickly. And even if there is a drop in the tariffs, that they could lose 5 million jobs. So remember that we...
Yes. If I bring you into a room with me and I pull the pin of a grenade, if I throw it on the ground, you're going to be hurt really badly. That's true. You're going to be hurt really badly. Success. Also, I will be hurt very badly. That's what he's saying. We have reason to believe that China will be very much hurt and will lose a lot of jobs if we proceed with these dramatic tariffs. Why do you think that is? It's because of economic destabilization that we're going to be hurt by too, Scott. Scott, you're the Treasury Secretary. I'm just a guy. I'm just a guy sitting in a room. It's a pretty cool room, I'll admit, but I'm just sitting in a, look at it, it's a cool room. It's a cool room. I bet you don't have a room like this, Scott. But you don't have a producer Jade and producer Cole, but you do have probably some cool stuff. You're the Treasury Secretary. That's a big position, and you're seeming to struggle. I did see a MAGA account respond to one of the first clips we watched, a guy named Paul, and said, Democrats continue to not understand that tariffs are used for negotiation. Okay? Except for when the Trump administration says it's not for negotiation. Except for when they say that is the way and the tool that we're going to use for prosperity. And then, if you're in these times and you're stressed and you're anxious because there's so much uncertainty, Karoline Leavitt has something for you to believe in.
Thank you, Caroline. A question for you and Secretary Bessent. We talk a lot about volatility and uncertainty in the marketplace, and the president has stated all along that he's more concerned about mainstream America, the American worker. You just talked about deregulation and this entire fair trade and reciprocals. What is your message to the American people in terms of letting them get through this disturbance and the outcome being greater and a greater good for the American worker, the American people, the American families?
Caroline, what is your message to people who are afraid?
I would say trust in President Trump. There's a
okay. Good. Trust in President Trump, she says. She always says Trump. I don't know why Trump doesn't really, but Trump. I'm down with it. Trust in President Trump. If that makes you feel better, then I'm glad for you. Okay? If you feel better being told by Leavitt to trust in Trump, then I feel better for you. But I don't feel better for me. And then we keep seeing, we have real reason to believe that ports are increasingly not as filled up as they should be. And that ships are like massive, near half empty with products, which is not normal, coming from certain places. They call it China. And that could be a sign of empty shelves and supply chain spiraling. And Scott Bessent, again, the Treasury Secretary, not a guy with a mic, but the Treasury Secretary, doesn't have any new information for us on that, or any, oh yes, we're preparing for supply chain disruptions with XYZ. No, it's just, nah, I'm not worried.
Thank you so much, Caroline. Thank you, Secretary. Back on China, does the administration anticipate supply chain shocks or supply shocks coming now that cargo shipments from China are significantly down? And if so, are there plans in the process of how to address that?
I wouldn't think that we would have supply chain shocks, and I think retailers, they have managed their inventory in front of this. You know, I speak to dozens.
I'm trying. Stay positive. We have it written on the wall. Positivity. He says, what? He says, I wouldn't think that we would have supply chains. I wouldn't think that we would have supply chain shocks. And I think retailers have managed their inventory in front of this. It's like you ask a little kid, like, you're definitely going to clean your room, right? Before I get back. There's not going to be any disruptions with that. I don't think that there would be any disruptions with that. I don't think there would be any reason I wouldn't clean my room. Bad metaphor, but you get the point. Very childish way to explain himself. I wouldn't think that we would. No, we're asking, there are supply chain shocks. There are. What are you going to do about it? And then he says, sorry, my laughing so I don't cry thing caused actual tears to come out. He said, I wouldn't think we would have. And then I think retailers have managed their inventory in front of this. So right now, our global supply chain, or at least the supply chain that, is more dependent on China, is dependent on retailers buying a bunch of sort of preemptively purchasing a bunch of inventory because they knew that this trade war was going to be happening. And so they prepared for it so that they would have enough inventory so that they wouldn't have to buy. But aren't they saying they're going to move production back to the United States? But he's just saying they bought a bunch from Chinese companies to stock it up so that they can keep selling to you without having to raise prices while the trade war goes on. And so then once the trade war's over, which we don't know when that will be, then they'll start buying again and it will all be like nothing happened. Well, the first problem with this is you have all these photos now being released and data on, as I mentioned, the empty ships. Here is the empty port in Seattle raising concerns of empty shelves in coming weeks from the Seattle Times, and a lot of other data points to that effect. But also just think about it sort of theoretically. Trump has been more haphazard, disjointed, disoriented, discombobulated with his implementation of this trade policy than anyone could have imagined. So we had no idea what the tariffs were going to be until quote unquote Liberation Day. And then once the Liberation Day, a few days later, was set to be implemented, he rescinded a big chunk of them, and then he raised the ones on China, and then he said they were going to be lowered, but then someone else said they weren't going to be lowered, but then someone else said they were going to be lowered, and then someone else said they weren't sustainable, someone else said they weren't sustainable. And so how would companies, what would be the business logic to we're going to front load, especially, okay, big companies can do that. Smaller businesses may not even have just the liquid cash sitting around to be able to front load a bunch of inventory. And they want to know how long they should be prepared for. Because guess what? Trump doesn't give us any expectations or predictions. That's the whole problem. He doesn't lay out a plan. We are going to have these as, negotiation time for this period. And then sometimes Trump says that high tariff rates are going to be forever because that's how we're going to make America prosperous again. Back in the late 1800s, we were the richest by comparison, relatively, they say relatively, the greatest, the most richest, prosperous country, even though that's not true in the history of that. And that was through tariffs, he said. And then he says we're going to be making a lot of money through tariffs. So much money, just again, I know it's going to be a long segment. Luke, it's too long. Shut up. We're going to be a rich country. Really think about this. We're going to make so much money from the tariffs. We're going to be bringing in so much tariff revenue that we may get rid of the income tax. This is all stuff Trump has said, which would mean we would need to bring in trillions of dollars to replace the income tax in tariffs, which is a tax, a regressive one on consumers. And so if you got rid of all the tariffs eventually, which it sounds like Besant is acting like kind of could be the case, which is why they should just front load the inventory because they should have known it's going to be temporary, then why would it be that we're going to make so much money over the long term that we're never going to get rid of the tariffs and we're going to replace the income tax with just tariffs? But if all of the companies start producing in the United States, we wouldn't have the tariffs, so we wouldn't be making the revenue from the U.S. companies that have to pay that tax that they pass on consumers. So we wouldn't be making much money from tariffs, which Trump keeps saying that we're going to make so much money from tariffs that we're going to get rid of all these taxes, even though tariffs are tax. If you're nauseous, same. Me as well. Igualmente, I think is the word. I only took a couple years of Spanish. Sorry. Now, Leavitt also did a new media presser. Oh, yeah, there's more. Yeah, there is. And take a look at this.
An accessible presidency in American history. So with that, let's kick it off. And I'm happy to take your question first, Aaron.
Thanks so much, Karoline, both for having us and for granting me the first question here.
Sure.
And I can attest to the deportations in Florida. My Uber drivers finally speak English again, so thank you for that. But my question for you is, what are the administration's plans for those who continue to defy the executive orders, most notably on my mind?
Did you hear? The new media is more like, let's get a bunch of cheerleaders in here and then just be like, you're right. And she says, I can attest that the deportations are going well because my Uber driver finally speaks English. Which I guess has been a big problem for her. Can I just say something? There are jobs. Can I? Is this a setting where I can talk? Is that what this is for? There are jobs where obviously being proficient in English is important, right? There's a lot of jobs where you would have to communicate a lot with the consumers. Fine, true. I feel like Uber might be a really good job if you're not super proficient in English. And if you are, but I'm just saying that's a good opportunity because I don't really like talking to my Uber driver. Anyways, sometimes it's great, but sometimes it's sort of like, it's 7 a.m. and I'm just slurping on my caffeine. I don't know if I need to hear about your whole life story, which sometimes Uber drivers will do. What is the problem with just hopping in? Or there's been deaf Uber drivers, and they have a little sign that says, "Hey, I'm deaf, so let me know if you need anything through like this gesture or something." Great, because I'm not going to need anything. You're going to take me, it's going to be perfect. I'll pay you, then I'll get out, and that's all I need. They're also going after truckers. But again, truckers? I feel like they're kind of just not... I feel like kind of strange places to start, no? But again, it's more about the imagery, the demonization. It's not that people don't acknowledge there are jobs where being proficient in English is really important. It's that they are needlessly going to cause labor shortages, probably, in sectors where this was actually a really good fit for people of certain language proficiencies than this.
And then the third executive order, which actually speaks to the heart of your question earlier about the Uber drivers, will be a order directing the Department of Transportation to include English literacy tests for our truckers. This is a big problem in the trucking community that, unless you're in that community, you might not know. But there's a lot of communication problems between truckers on the road with federal officials and local officials as well, which obviously is a public safety risk. So we're going to ensure that our truckers, who are the backbone...
Chuckers? She just can't say Trump or truckers. It's always chump and chuckers.
So we're going to ensure that our truckers, who are the...
We got to get that on. That's good. I like that. Chuckers.
...risk. So we're going to ensure that our truckers...
Mother trucker!
We're going to ensure that our truckers, who are the backbone of our economy, are all able to speak English. That's a very common sense policy in the United States of America. So the president will be signing that later this afternoon. Yeah.
I'm telling you, in an already tight labor market, this is going to cause even more price increases. They want to do everything, it seems, for price increase purposes. And this is so much for them about PR because this is so exciting to the base. Frankly, that's what this is. I just want to say, in case I'm fine if the Uber wants to talk with me. It's okay. I'm not saying don't talk. I'm just saying it's nice when you can sit quietly and just have a meditative moment. That's all I'm saying. Okay. So if they happen not to speak my language, it's fine. Don't worry about it. Apparently, they're standing by Hegseth.
Peter, we'll go to the back row in the middle, to the blonde.
Yes. Hello. President Trump has said that Secretary Hegseth will get it together. Does he think that Hegseth doesn't have it together right now?
Look, the president has made his position on Secretary Hegseth quite clear. He absolutely has confidence in the secretary's ability to lead the Pentagon. It's why he nominated him for this position. It's why the Senate voted to confirm him in this position. And look at the success that DOD has had thus far. Their successful operation against the Houthi terrorists in the Middle East. You look at the recruitment and
all right, and on the stuff that we hear over and over again, yes, we know the efficacy of our U.S. military. It's the leadership of it that seems to be faltering. Now, the next clip needs some context. BBC reports judge says U.S. citizen at 2 may have been deported without meaningful due process. Rolling Stone, Trump has now deported multiple U.S. citizen children with cancer. U.S. citizens. Here's a local news station reporting on this.
U.S. citizen children were deported to Honduras out of Louisiana. A U.S. district judge says the deportation, quote, had no meaningful process. Fox 26's Jonathan Mejia spoke with the attorney representing the family. Jonathan, they're saying these mothers had no legal options available to them.
That's right, Rashi. The attorney told me that these deportations were shocking, surprising, and deeply troubling, as these families were detained and had no option to seek legal help.
This is a family that did have legal options available to them. And because of ICE's actions of holding them incommunicado for 3 days, those options were not able to be pursued. And that can't feel anything but intentional.
A Honduran mother and her 2 children were deported by ICE on Friday. The mother and older sister had a deportation order. However, the 2-year-old girl is a U.S. citizen.
It's completely unlawful for ICE, an immigration agency, to detain or deport a U.S. citizen. They have absolutely no authority to do that.
Speaking freely in Honduras, the mother was able to tell her attorneys that she was not given a choice, but more so was told what to do.
ICE is...
And the reporting goes on, but you have, again, there's lack of transparency from the Trump administration. They're doing this so hastily and violating people's rights and throwing out due process because, of course, a mother would have legal options. Even with an immigration status, I bring up the lack of transparency because it's hard to know exactly the details of all these cases, but that's unknown. Maybe she's an undocumented immigrant, but who has a U.S. citizen child who has a severe medical issue and needs reoccurring treatment, and then without an ability to shift legal guardianship so that at least the child can stay in the United States, or to create a treatment plan as they're being transferred, and without any chance to make their legal case because, and this is illegal, a U.S. citizen without any protocols in place is being deported to a different country. And it's absolutely horrific. Meanwhile, people like Republican Clay Higgins are saying we should arrest 100 more judges. Arrogant elitist black robes have been raping our core principles for decades. If the DOJ needs a list, I have it. So people just rooting this on completely. And Holman was asked about this.
Go ahead. This is a question for Mr. Homan. Late last week, there were 3 U.S. citizen children who were removed with their mothers who were in the United States illegally. There have been a federal judge in Louisiana who was appointed by President Trump said that he was concerned that there was, quote, no meaningful process. Are you concerned that due process, at least for the U.S. citizen children, is being flouted, and that the speed at which the enforcement is being done could lead to errors, as was the case in the Kilmar-Abrego Garcia case? And then also, if you could give an update on the deportation numbers under this administration.
So I'm going to try to respond to what Holman says here. A lot of it is genuinely incomprehensible, so we'll try to listen.
And whether you're pleased with them.
First of all, I don't accept the term error in Abrego Garcia. There was an oversight. There was a withholding order. But things have changed. The facts around the withholding order has changed. He is now a terrorist, which is the withholding order set aside. And the gang he was fearing from being removed out of El Salvador no longer exists. So the facts around that case are totally different. I'll let the lawyers litigate that. But as far as the U.S. 3 USC kids...
What? What? Did you... What did he just say? I heard him say something about Abrego Garcia being a terrorist. You haven't proven that.
I'd said from day one that if you enter this country legally, it's a crime. If you remain in this country legally and you ignore a judge's order about deporting, if you choose to have a U.S. citizen child, knowing you're in this country legally, you put yourself in that position. You put your family in that position. What we did is remove children with their mothers who requested the children depart with them. This was a parental decision.
Lie. As the mother said in one of these cases. Lie. And it seems like it was so quick that they weren't even allowed upon detention to have a meaningful chance, which is why a Trump appointee is sounding the alarm about this, to contact legal counsel or contact other people who maybe have legal status, who are family, could be legal guardians, to figure out what to do. Even if they individually were going to be deported, how to keep the U.S. citizen, as they have the right to, in the United States with someone. And they didn't even have the chance to do that. And you need medical treatment, which they had no plan for. And so then they're just lying, saying this was requested by the parent being disputed by the parents. So I heard that part, but the rest of it, I honestly, very strange that they would have him be any sort of spokesperson. And then to round this out, the two vile characters, Alex Jones and Nick Fuentes, even they, in this clip, go on to say, I think the Trump administration is targeting the wrong people.
I disagree. I think that he's trying to, maybe he's trying to, but when you look at the numbers as they are, they're not deporting a lot of people.
500 a day.
Which is not a lot. I mean, by the end of 4 years, that's going to be...
Are they there?
That's what I hear.
800, 900,000, which is fewer than Obama's first term. That's fewer than Trump's first term. We were thinking like 1 million per year.
But you understand. Respond to that, though. He doesn't have a magic wand. You know they dismantled the system in the last 4 years.
Yeah. I think they could ramp it up more. I don't think they're trying to get everybody out. I don't think they're even trying because...
Well, this is the thing. I know a lot of people in town and others who have, like a Ukrainian guy, been here 20-something years. His kids are all born here, already in college. He's being deported. I know a bunch of people in Austin, Hispanic, you name it, who like have kids here that are 25 years old. They've been deported.
How many do you think will be deported by the end of the year?
What's sad is they're getting the people that aren't hiding. They need to have a better system.
They should, but they also...
You don't want to deport people that are non-citizens because they're protesting Israel, but people that have been here 20 years and have a big business and have a bunch of kids here and are contributing, I don't care if they're brown or white, I think they have a right, I think Trump should get a better... they're trying so hard to get people and impress everybody because the base wants it, that they are just grabbing a lot of people that should be last on the list, if at all, because the bad people are hiding.
This guy right here is a neo-Nazi, and this guy right here is Alex Jones. I don't know how you would conspiracy theorists, I don't know. But and even they, specifically Alex Jones, is going, wait, you're just trying to juice the numbers, so then you're starting with people who aren't sort of who you'd reasonably prioritize, and you're ripping people's lives apart instead of prioritizing who, number one, is not in the country legally. Okay, obviously, that's kind of a prerequisite. And number two, well, actually, they've gone after people who are in the country legally, but you'd imagine. And number two, have committed crimes and, we wouldn't want in the country. Even Alex Jones is going just for the PR. They're going after people who you wouldn't reasonably prioritize. Wow. That was a long one. Something got into me. Today's going to be a crazy one. I appreciate all of you, and I'll talk to you in the next video. Yes, there's going to be more.